Alright everyone, welcome back to our Suzerain playthrough. JP the Third of Venus now with you. We are in a very strong tactical position in this session. The economy is doing great, the budget is dead even, but we have a foreign policy crisis on our way. I'm going to address that here. The Merkope crew just finished their preparations for the interview. Lucian stopped me on my way out to the balcony of the Blue Mansion, where the filming crew were standing ready to start filming. Are you ready for the interview, sir? Yes. Good. I've done my best to make this happen. This is very important to our administration. The crew is ready to start filming. Mr. Sacker is excited to interview you. As I explained before, it would be bad press to decline this interview offer. They are the most prestigious interview program in the world. And they're from Karute. The country is known for its neutrality. I don't think there will be too much pressure. It's fine. I can handle it. I walked to the balcony and sat on the seat prepared for me, directly in front of Mr. Sacker. There's no contest entry to almost Sacker. Mr. President, welcome to 101. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you. Let us begin with the latest incident between Sordland and Rumberg. An aircraft of the Swedish Air Forces was shot down by Rumbergian anti-air guns a few weeks ago. Officials from the Rumbergian government proclaimed that the aircraft was flying inside the airspace of Rumberg. Just a few days after the incident, Swedish anti-air guns shot down a Rumbergian airplane. This time, your government proclaimed exactly the same, while the Rumbergian government insisted that their plane was inside their airspace. Many argue that this was not a coincidence, and the Swedish army acted intentionally in retaliation. Did you give such an order? No, I didn't. Our forces only acted in response to their breach of our airspace. Are you saying that the Rumbergian officials are lying? Are you absolutely certain that their plane was inside Swedish airspace? Yes, they lied in both instances. These were harassments against Sordland. Do you believe these harassments could lead to an actual war between Sordland and Rumberg in the future? I believe that's what Rumberg wants. They have been working to get the justification for such an action. This week, both Arcadian and United Cantonan governments have condemned the airplane incident. Do you think they would be involved as mediators in the case of a broader conflict between your countries? I hope so. We look up to the international community to maintain peace in all of Merkope. You have also earlier claimed that Rumberg has been spying on your administration, and the alleged spy was none other than your own secretary. Rumberg has since denied all your claims. He stared into my eyes awaiting a response. We have all the evidence. It was them. The world should know about Rumberg's interference with its neighbors. This is a very serious accusation, Mr. President. Well, the scandal caused by that resulted in Mr. Vector leaving his office. He was blamed and you appointed a new vice president. Many claim that this was just an internal political move designed to eliminate the vice president. What do you have to say about these accusations? It's all nonsense. We'll try and... Even though he screwed us over, we're still covering for Peter. There you go. It's all nonsense. We have evidence she was working for Rumberg. Her real name is Alana Vance. Don't you think you were partly to blame? She was your secretary. It was going on right under your nose. To some extent, yes. All of our administration shares the responsibility for letting such a scandal take place. He didn't look like he was satisfied by my response. He stopped for a moment and took a brief look at his papers. Okay, let's turn back to your foreign policy. He wanted me to knife Peter there. Let's talk about the ongoing conflict about the Helgeland Island. The Icelandic Navy has been increasingly active in the Markian Sea. As you know, they've been harassing Agnolian ships, and recently, Swedish ships as well. I believe Sordland is committed to stand together with Agnolia. In fact, you have a military alliance with them. What do you think about Vogsland's actions and their claims on the island? Well, it is very concerning. We can't have them harass other nations on the Marquise Sea. The seas are not there to claim. Do you think the hostilities between Agnolia and Vogsland can erupt in hot war? It is definitely a possibility. Therefore, all nations of Eastern Merkope should do their best to calm the situation. Will Sordland also get involved if the situation gets out of control? Yes. The Swordish armed forces and the Swordish navy is ready to act if our allies need us. Why is it that you're supporting Agnolia's side in this conflict, Mr. President? Sordland has always had good relations with Agnolia. They control the island, and nobody has the right to interfere. Okay, let's move on to another topic. Last year, a huge conflict took place close to your borders with Valen. When the Vezek forces partook in a massacre of Bludish civilians under the guise of eliminating the Bludish Freedom Front, Sordland decided to stay out of the conflict. In fact, many refugees fleeing from the massacre came to Sordland. Knowing that Sordland also had its troubles with the Bludish independence movement, how did Sordland cope with the influx of Bludish refugees coming in from Valen? I don't understand the crest. The Bludish movement has nothing to do with this. I guess they cut out a whole point of it. They could have been Sword or Vezek as well. First and foremost, they are human beings. The world has been watching this humanitarian crisis with utmost attention, and I have to give you credit for allowing these people to enter Sordland. Unlike your neighbor Lesbia, Sordland took the responsibility. You feel the burden of being the only country who opened their borders to the refugees. To some extent, but we can't complain. And in an ideal world, all surrounding nations would take the responsibility, but Sordland stands alone yet again. I understand. Can you say with certainty that these refugees can adapt and find a better life in Sordland? Yes, I genuinely believe that. But how about, on the gesture of the director, he stopped before finishing the sentence? Well, it seems that's all the time we have for today. The director shouted at the crew to start recording. We both stood up and shook hands. Thank you for your valuable time, Mr. President. It was a pleasure. Hopefully next time we'll meet in Kirute. He smiled. Of course, Mr. President. You'd always be welcome in Kirute. Lucian walked up to the director and started talking to him. I went inside the building. I think that went well, although we've made a lot of headlines. Monson Lake, where's he going on? Member of the Assembly and the current leader of the Workers' Party of Bludia? Oh, he's moved parties. The Workers' Party of Bludia announced the independent MP and the previous leader of the WPB, Monson Lake, something around there, would be the replacement for Fatih Ajal. In a public speech, Lake said, I left the party of my own volition after failing to pass the threshold years ago. I never expected to be here again. Unfortunately, Fatih Ajal was targeted by ultranationalists, and I was asked to replace him during these tumultuous times. I'm grateful to every Workers' Party member for welcoming me back with such open arms. Rest assured I will do my very best to serve this honorable task given to me, and will not let Ajal down. Sordland depended on on foreign help. This is them knocking the loan. But they do give us a little bit of credit here. During Sordland's darkest hour, President Rayne took the reign and led the country out of depression. Millions of jobs added, countless businesses opened, and myriad investors pouring into Sordland. Economists and foreign leaders predict Sordland to be an economic giant in the long run, while historians will engrave the Great Sordland Recovery to Sordland's records. And due to its incompetence, President Mr. Rayne has requested 3 billion Sordland rand from outsiders because of the Sordland stands to do their bidding and call like a lapdog. Yeah, shut up. Earlier this week, the administration announced that it would be borrowing 3 billion yen from the MFI. The move is aimed to solve the ongoing budget problem. However, citizens from both the liberal and conservative factions have denounced the move. This is a high-risk decision from the president since the election is closing in. It is, but I think it was the right move. 2 weeks after Ajal was poisoned, the Workers' Party of Bludia announced that Manson-Lek rejoined the party again to assume the leadership position. The party released a statement saying that Ajal's condition is currently stable, but his recovery will take a long time. We invited back our previous leader, Lake, back to lead us to the assembly, and he was very gracious to accept our offer, said the WPB spokesman. It's unclear if the rising trend of the WPB will continue with Lake's leadership. To resolve the mess he made, the president has requested more than 3 billion Swedish friends from the MFI. As he aimed to cover up his incompetence, he had placed Sordland under the thumbs of others. Blah, 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 blah. Like, these are two different writers here. Raynomics improved living standards. At the end of his term, President Rayne has brought more changes to Sordland than ever. Albeit not all are positive yet. The situation with Sordland's living standards have increased. Based on new research, Swedish citizens' life expectancy is at its highest in history. The president's policies have given every person the same economic opportunity to strive forward. It is the most excellent news for any Swedish resident since the forming of the Republic. Great Swedish, the Economist at least, is on our side. Under the president's brilliant leadership, Sordland has lifted itself out of the Great Depression. Jobs and investments are returning in the millions and thousands as the country's GDP rises without sign of stopping. Undeterred and unhindered by the crisis, the president steered the nation onward. With this momentum, Sordland is destined to become the golden apple of the Merkope region. It appears the best is yet to come. Olmec announced the expulsion of Rumberg. Following his latest TV interview, President Rayne seems to be successful so far in receiving the backing of the international community. Led by Sordland's request, Olmec has decided to expel Rumberg from the Eastern Merkope Economic Forum. Undoubtedly a drastic and surprising resolution, this move will sever the long-strained economic ties of Rumberg with the organization. Queen Beatrice Livingston refrained from making any comment yet. Yeah, the more pressure we can put on them, the better. I thought we read that last time, but apparently not. Let's see what's up here. Yeah, all this has already been announced in the news. So early morning at the Rayne household, let's see what's going on at the house. As usual, I woke up early in the morning, I put on my clothes and went downstairs. I made a cup of finely ground Swedish coffee along with a slice of buttered toast and sat down in front of the TV to watch the morning news. I changed the channel to the SBC news and took a bite of my toast. I'm curious to see what President Rayne's response will be. For those who are tuning in late, today is certainly going to be a rough day for the administration. We have confirmation about the certainty of these leaks. This is nothing short of a major scandal that could very well lead to the impeachment of President Rayne. What? I froze and dropped the toast I was about to bite into. As per the recent information we have received, President Rayne's name is mentioned many times in these leaks. According to the documents, she peeked at the paper in front of her and started reading. President Rayne abused his power to send his son Frank Rayne to Hosel State University. That's it? We have been trying to reach out to the Maroon Palace about these allegations and scandals. However, we have been unable to reach anyone yet. I turned off the TV. I buried my face in my hands. We'll be okay. Our top SBC reporters have broke the most scandalous stories ever. We sent our son to school. Oh no. Lies, lies, and tell me more little lies that spilled from Rayne's lips are revealed in front of national television. Our nation is used to betrayal, but not on such a scale. The popular vote? Yeah, I'll be fine. If that's the worst we got, we'll be alright. That's the best you got? Seriously? The best you got is that I sent my son— oh no, I sent my son to private school. Oh no. I'll be alright. The thrum of helicopter engines, the first of its kind in Sordland, was deafening as we touched down on the landing pad of Anton Rayne prison. I thought it was something serious. That's literally just Marcel Caranti's revenge. That is his petty revenge. Like, you sent your son to school. Oh no. We'll be fine. I stepped out, bracing myself against the salty winds. The noise of the helicopter was replaced by that of squawking seabirds and waves furiously crashing on the jagged rocks below. Flanked by my guards, I walked into the anti-rock prison. A team of security personnel led me through the winding corridors of the ground floor. Passing by the rows of cells, I wondered how Livia was doing. But that wasn't who I was here to see. At the back of the building, we came to an elevator. The guards punched her in the code, and we rode all the way to the top floor of the prison. Lilius had a corner cell with large windows overlooking the seaside. It was equipped with a comfortable-looking bed and a modest writing desk. She appeared to be busy writing letters as the guards opened the door to the room. Hello, Lilius. Mr. President, what brings you all this way? Why did you kill Bernard Circus? I thought you already knew the answer to that. I and my colleagues judged you to be a threat to Sordland. From the start of your term, we felt you were putting the country at risk of succumbing to outside influence. Obviously, we were right. As I tried to tell you many times when we were working together, Sordland is not Acacia. Your heedless shift towards liberalism will only bring chaos. The Sordland people want to change. You can't just disregard their will. The people don't always know best. And you think you would have done a better job? I would not have let our proud republic stray so far from the solid roots. Is that who those letters are for? Your beloved Tarkin Saul? I know what you're implying. Liz drew herself up, her back straight as a rod. Tarkin Saul is a great man, with whom I share many ideals. But my decisions have always been my own, including the decision to sacrifice one man's life to save millions of Sordland people. The decision wasn't yours to make. History will redeem me, even if you won't. But as for you, all this change you've attempted to bring to Sordland, is it truly for the betterment of the country, or to submit a place for Anton Rayne in the history books? Sooner or later, the people will realize that Saul was the best leader they'll ever have. I've had enough of this. I'm leaving. Lilius nodded and turned it back to her correspondence. Thank you for the visit, Mr. President. I'm sure this isn't the last time we'll see of each other. No, it is. The guards relocked her cell door and escorted me away. On the way back to Holsworth, I couldn't help thinking about what she said. Would I ever be able to escape Saul's shadow? President Rayne. What was behind President Rayne's visit to former Interior Minister Lilius Graff in Anton Rayne prison? Shortly after Rayne and his anti-corruption police unfairly jailed Mrs. Graff in the assassination of notorious communist Bernard Circus, the president made a personal helicopter trip to Anton Rock in order to visit her cell. Was it to question her further? Could it deal with her for early release, or simply rub salt in the wounds? Well, only one thing can be certain. Following this development, our president can't be trusted. Yeah. Government going on got a whole lot more interesting as Interior Minister Lilius Graff, one of Sordland's most prominent conservatives, whose support is widely thought to have gotten President Rayne elected, was thrown in jail for co-conspiring to assassinate author and MP Bernard Circus at the start of Rayne's term. An investigation by the anti-corruption police, a new task force founded by Rayne and headed up by Justice Minister Nia Morgna, revealed Graff's role in the plot. She had been sentenced to life in Anton Rayne prison. When the Rayne administration will be next to go? It was an unusual day for the residents of Holsworth. Regularly used streets and avenues were blocked off by the military personnel. Many shops and cafes were closed, and once crowded stores were now empty. Instead, thousands of residents in Holsworth were concentrated in one street, Victory Avenue. Stretched out through the heart of Holsworth, people on both sides of the road were waving their Swedish flags proudly for the military parade. I was getting prepared to embark on my trip. It was going to be a short drive down Victory Avenue until we reached Maroon Palace. My company for this trip was Yosef with Sergei, as usual, driving the presidential car. Yosef approached me. He was wearing his decorated ceremony outfit. He carried a sword with a goat head at the handle and his pistol by his hip. He put on his cap. Mr. President, we are almost ready. We will depart right after the tank call. Rumberg will think twice after today. They will tremble before the Swedish military might. After hearing a loud thump of a book falling down the floor, he turned to a couple privates that were doing the preparations on the schedule and started walking their direction. Private, can't you do your job properly? I watched the young soldiers perform a lousy salute to Yosef. What was that salute, soldier? This is a real salute! He performed an excellent salute, and after scolding the privates, he walked back. Strict as ever. Old habits die hard. Sergei appeared from the entrance and joined us. Mr. President, Mr. Lancia. Sergei performed the salute to Yosef, which made Yosef smile under his mustache. At ease, Mr. Walker. Are we ready to depart yet? Yes, sir. Follow me, please. We started following Sergei through the corridors. Mr. President, have you seen the tanks? Our planes, too. Rumberg will be so scared when they see us. Yes, Sergei, I have seen it. My kids were very excited to wake up today. You know, to see the planes fly. Sergei, where did you do your military service? Mona, 7th Artillery Squadron. I still talk with many of my friends from those days. Camaraderie of the military is never forgotten. I still talk with many from my days as well. What about you, sir? All over Sordland. You know, Mr. President was under my command once. Rumberg outpost. He turned to me. Do you remember those days? Who can forget about Major Lancia? We called him the Relentless. Joseph let out a long laugh. Good old days. We're here, sir. We exited the building and walked over to the clearance where the Black Cadillac, the presidential car, was waiting. It was decorated properly for the event, and the top canopy had been removed so that we could stand and wave to the people. On our way to the car, generals and admirals were lined up on both sides of the carpet. The atmosphere immediately changed when these experienced soldiers who fought many times for their country saluted me. I saluted back with respect. We entered the car and Sergei started the engine. Yosef was standing right next to me. The car started rolling. Even though there were many walls and trees in between the car and the crowd, I was able to hear the deafening sound of cheering Sordid citizens. Gradually, we made our way to the starting point. A couple of old propeller planes flew above our heads, and I thought whether the planes were older than me. Loud footsteps of the marching soldiers were followed by loud noises coming from the tank engines. The tanks came into my view. They were not the most modern models, however, they displayed our military might. I couldn't even finish my thought, and one of the tanks broke down and had to be towed. That's lovely. We waited for a few minutes before the announcement. Finally, it was our turn. On both sides of the Victory Avenue, there were numerous citizens cheering my name, waving their Swordish flags. I waved to the people. Looking at the benches where the general staff was sitting, I saw Tarkin Saul sitting next to General Vulcan. We kept our slow and steady pace. We were almost at the Artur SVC statue several hundred meters away. A group of soldiers saluted me as we passed by. They looked proud and stout in their new infantry military uniforms and with brand new rifles. We continued on as per the schedule and finally arrived at the Maroon Palace, which marked the end of the parade. People of Holsword dispersed into their homes. A clear message was sent to the Rumberg by the display of our military might, minus that one tank that broke down. We were about to see whether it would be enough or not. And that's the turn. Will of the state. World leaders together at the Alliance of Nations. Calling for a session on the current affairs, our world leaders will be gathering at the Alliance of Nations next week. The main highlights for the upcoming agenda were announced, and as expected, they will be around the current issues of Eastern Merkope. In addition to the member states of the region, President Walker and Chairman Maleniev will be delivering their speeches at the Assembly. All eyes will turn to Constantium, Kirute, as the historic session will be taking place in the Alliance of Nations headquarters. Getting right to it. We received the schedule for the upcoming Alliance of Nations session. According to the dates outlined, Sordland 1 is being prepared for the flight to Constantium, Kirute. Minister of Foreign Affairs David Vissi will be attending the session as well as accompanying Mr. President on the flight. Alright. It's the only item on the agenda. Let's go. I, David Vissi, and the rest of the Swordish delegation to the Alliance of Nations arrived in Kirute. Local police escorted us to the Alliance headquarters in downtown Constantium, immediately recognized by its gleaming dome. On entering the building, we were met with a parliamentary guide who briefed us about the procedures. After a strict security screening, the staff ushered us to the third floor. We entered the massive circular assembly hall and took our designated seats. David sat next to me. All of the world's most powerful people under one gleaming dome. It's amazing how someone has managed to fill a room with people that absolutely loathe each other. It is truly astounding. Humanity has come far. How are you feeling, Anton? Being the president must have taken a toll on you and your family. We managed. Somehow. It is tough to be the president, making harsh decisions and dealing with the consequences. I wish I could have supported you more, but time has been a cruel mistress. I could honestly say your advice wasn't that good anyway. What a dick. What you have done so far is more than enough. Don't treat yourself so harshly. From the distance, you could see the president of the General Assembly, Mr. Nines, appearing in his Nines, approaching his designated position. Well, the session is about to start. Let's get comfortable. It's going to be a long day. Mr. Nines opened the session with a short speech and called the first speaker to the floor. It is with great pleasure to invite the Prime Minister of Lesbia to address the Assembly. Patricia Alvarez stood up and walked to the podium as the Assembly applauded. Mr. President, it is a great pleasure to return to this podium. David leaned in and spoke in a low voice. Let's see how crazy this year's session will get. I'm surprised he isn't drunk, David chuckled. When I last spoke here, the message I gave was of encouragement and support to this organization and the vital role it plays. Of all the challenges Eastern Merkope and the whole world have faced since then, one has grown larger and more imminent than any other. The threat of the so-called socialist states and the actions taken by their authoritarian rulers, with no regard to international law. A loud noise came from the table of Volksland. I saw Emmerich Hegel pounding his fist on the table in protest. Looks like the Chancellor is already mad, David nodded. Today, the need to come together as the leaders of the free world is more important than ever. The CSP, under the leadership of United Cantana, has been fueling Volksland's military-industrial complex and its expansionist aims in Eastern Merkope. The world cannot turn a blind eye to the increasing naval presence of Volksland in the Marking Sea. We hereby call for the immediate withdrawal of all naval vessels with any offensive capability from international waters. A loud noise came from the assembly hall in response. Most of Western Merkope delegates were clapping, while others either shouted in protest or sat in stony silence. Let us also not forget about the recent events that transpired in another state with socialist leanings, a state that wages war against its own innocent citizens, Valen. I kept listening. Their purge of the minorities in their country was again largely ignored by the international community. I would go so far to call it a genocide. Valen violated our past treaties and mobilized their armed forces, deploying them closely to our borders and authorizing them to partake in massacres. Lesbia was affected not only by a large wave of refugees coming from Valen, but by the secret government seizure of all of our companies that were active in the country. I hereby call the member states to action against Valen and its rogue government. Thank you. I clapped. He walked back to his seat amidst enthusiastic applause from most of the Merkope delegates. President Nines waited for the noise to calm down and invited the next speaker, the president of Valen, Victor Smollett. Smollett stood up. As he walked past Patricia Alvarez, he brushed him aside with an exaggerated sweep of his arms. This asshole. When he reached the podium, he fumbled with the microphone for a few minutes. Then he smiled at Alvarez mockingly as he raised the height of it. Okay, look at all the theatrics. Yes, that's him. There's a turn to President Nines and bowed slightly. Mr. President. He turned back at us and stared out into the hall for a few seconds. Fellow delegates, it is true that the world today faces a multitude of challenges. In the midst of these challenges, the world's most powerful leaders gather here in Karute. And what do? They make threats, promote hate, and spread lies. Is this the alliance of nations we all want? Where's the cooperation and friendship? Where's the unity? I want to remind you of the wars that the West fought on our soil, of the foreign troops who occupied our country and seized our valuable resources. I want to remind you how they stole the oil from our sacred soil, and they did not know when to stop. The ATO soldiers left, but their interference never ceased. They financed armed rebel groups whose only purpose is to create terror inside of our country. So, fellow delegates, don't you dare speak about Valen before you acknowledge your involvement in our civil war, before you acknowledge your own dark past. That's an empty argument. It doesn't justify what Valen did. What did you expect, Mr. President? It's President Smolak. As is well known, after the tremendous tragedy of the Valen Civil War, Arcadia made a deal with United Cantana, where they agreed upon the withdrawal of their troops along with the removal of half of our army. Not only did they weaken us, we were left alone and facing the genocidal British Freedom Front, which the ATO funds together with Rumberg. I will show you some of the evidence of foreign interference. He picked up a large stack of papers and waved them back and forth. I have clear evidence of direct aid from Rumberg to the British Freedom Front. They smuggled a ton of K-74s in Valen. They smuggled in their spies, smuggled in mercenary commanders. He's finally talking about it. We're not the only ones now. So it seems. These documents will be published everywhere. Copies have already been sent to the investigative affairs of the Alliance of Nations. I expect this organization will do its task and investigate this properly, instead of leaving Valen behind as they've always done. Coming back to the claims of the lesbian representative. First, there is no evidence of civilian massacres by the Vesic forces, nor so-called purges of minorities. Second, the operation was limited only to the militant BFF, not the Blues in general. Third, we know your government is also implicated in the funding of the BFF, and that your oil companies aided their militants during the operation. Fourth, as the state, we took only what was ours. The companies the delegates spoke of were not only aiding militants, they were also brought to Valen by force. Know that Valen will no longer recognize the right of any other country to determine what type of weapons we are permitted to possess or what type of policies we follow within our borders. Valen stands stronger and more united than ever. Our people have spoken. The enemies inside our borders are crushed. Now I ask every delegate here to read our report on the connections of the West and the armed militants in Eastern Merkope. And I ask that the Alliance Nation do what's right. Valen only wants peace. Our people want peace. They are counting on the support and understanding of all the nations of the world. Their proclamation is free Valen or death. The Assembly roared, and a particularly loud applause coming from the seats of the Rican nations. He seems to be popular with Rica, doesn't he? Well, he played the victim here pretty strongly, and his anti-imperialist stance has definitely earned him sympathy from Ricans. Most of that continent has still not achieved stability after gaining their independence from the colonial suzerains. It's easy to forget that it's only been a few years since the revolutions. Victor slowly walked back to his seat as he applauded himself. He saluted Rican delegates as he passed them. Next, President Nines invited Martin Van Houten to the podium. He walked up to the microphone with quick steps. He was frowning with clenching his fist. I could almost see his jaws trembling. Seems like Martin is not in the mood. Can you blame him? His navy is being harassed by Voxelan every day now. Mr. President, fellow delegates of the Assembly and friends, it is an honor to be with you. It is an honor to be with you today. I wish we could meet under different circumstances. Once again, the CSP nation, and in particular Voxelan, has shown us what they're willing to do to achieve their political aims. I must first thank the delegates from Sordland for being brave enough to support Agnolia when the whole world left us alone. We were one of the first countries to propose proper cooperation between Eastern Merkope nations. Yet when we were threatened by Voxelandian expansionism, nobody came to our side. Although Mr. Alvarez voiced his indirect support for us earlier in today's session, I can't keep myself from wondering where he was when our fleets were under attack by the very socialists he spoke about. So here I am, asking for the support of the fellow member states of the Alliance of Nations. Agnolia is under attack by Voxelan. A loud banging noise emerged from the table of the Voxelandian delegates. All of them were pounding their fists on the table. Those delegates need to learn some respect. That's for sure. Mr. President, please moderate the Assembly. This is more than disrespectful. Emery Hagel began shouting curses as Nines repeatedly banged his gavel for order. After a minute of back and forth shouting, the noise settled and Nines allowed Martin to continue. As you all know, our drilling ships, oil tankers, and even fishing vessels have been disappearing in the Markian Sea, captured or sunk by Voxelan. And the Voxelandian fleet is patrolling the seas around Helgeland with complete disregard to international laws. I call on the Alliance of Nations to find a resolution to this never-ending conflict that Voxelan created. We demand the immediate withdrawal of all naval forces from our territorial waters. Millenniumist terror surrounds us on all sides. I call the democratic world to action against the tyranny of millennialism, authoritarianism, militarism, and extremism. The begging noise started again. Hegel stood up and approached the rostrum. You are a spineless jerk, a lackey of Arcadian imperialism. President Nina's call for silence started hitting his gavel. I stood up. Mr. President, point of order. The Chancellor has no right to intervene. You have no right to intervene. Know your place, President Rayne. President Nina smacked his gavel in vain as a shouting match broke out in the assembly. Finally, after a few minutes, the other Voxlanian delegates convinced Hegel to sit back down. I believe I don't need to speak more about this subject. Everything is clear as day. Mr. Hegel's actions speak volumes about the reality of Voxland and their corrupted ideology. I hope to see this conflict resolved with the help of the Alliance of Nations soon. He quickly left the podium and nodded to the other Agnolian delegate. The two of them left the assembly hall. President Nina approached the next speaker. Announced the next speaker, Emmerich Hegel. Hegel immediately took his place and spoke in a low, seething tone. Thank you. David, buckle up. It's the Chancellor's time now. It looks like you're having fun, Mr. President. First of all, I want to extend a due welcome to the new states from Rica that have joined this organization. After fighting for years against colonialism and imperialism, they've more than earned their membership vote. I'm overjoyed to see them finally represented in this assembly. As our numbers grow and more states are represented in this stage, we come ever closer to finding resolutions to the conflicts that plague us. For hundreds of years, the dominant economies of Merkope raised, pillaged, and exploited the continents like Rica and Xena. Sadly, Voxland was also part of this plunder in the years before the revolution, when it still clung to the idea of imperialism. When our masters found their voice, the old colonial powers and their new financiers turned against them. These powers did whatever they could to hamper our revolutions. They did not want the people to be heard. They're scared of us for showing the possibility of a better path. Of course, they don't want us to succeed. We threaten the productivity that runs the blood and sweat of their working class. That runs on the blah, 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 blah. And now they have started labeling us the aggressors. Yet we all know that it was the Arcadians who built up military bases all around Merkope. It was the ATO that was first formed to fight against millennialism. I kept watching. Voxland holds the right to protect its territorial waters and trade from threats. The delegate from Lesbian Agnolia brought up the Faleco Treaty. But what were they doing when ATO forces patrolled the Arctician? I'm going to say Antiseian. That's the best I can come up with. The Antiseian Sea. They were silent. What about Helgeland? What about the Vols being killed by the Agnolian government because they protested against their appointed governor? Agnolia and their allies in Sordland have no right to claim they are upholding liberty and democracy. Other nations have no right to intervene in the matters between Agnolia and Voxland. Just as no country in the world has the right to determine what type of naval vessels we use, no country can force us not to defend our seas. If there is conflict the Alliance can resolve, let's start with the Acadian base on Ravnos Island. Lesbia has been housing Arcadian troops and missiles by our borders for years, and none of the member states even talked about it. I also want the member states to look into their Arcadian bases in both Lesbia and Sordland. And if the Alliance of Nations truly claims to have the people's best interests at heart, they can't stay silent about what the Agnolian government did in Helgeland, how they took away the rights of our people. Perhaps then they can properly dialogue between our nations, and the Alliance of Nations can finally demonstrate that it can serve its intended purpose. But unfortunately, the Alliance of Nations remains all too willing to overlook such human rights violations. However, the Voxlandian government is ready, as always, to fight the forces of oppression and colonial servitude on behalf of the free people everywhere. On behalf of free people everywhere. He raised his left fist. A revolution vescore. Was that Sordish? Did I catch that right? He did say the revolution would come, yes, but it was an old Volkish. Very similar to Sordish, right? Some words are even written in the same way, but I'm surprised you caught that from his accent. Most of the delegates from Xena, Rica, and Quintana responded with thunderous applause. Hegel shook hands with them as he walked back to his seat. President Nina has announced the next speaker, Queen Beatrice Livingston. Dear President of the Assembly, dear delegates, dear leaders of the world, just as my fellow Eastern Merkopan delegates spoke about the troubles plaguing our continent, I also have to bring attention to a growing threat in our region, Sordland. As you know, not long ago, Sordish aircraft with offensive capabilities were spotted inside our borders. A few days later, they shot down one of our planes inside of our own airspace. It was practically an act of war. Know this, Rumberg will do anything in its power to defend itself and its interest, whether Sordland is actually planning something or not. Our Swedish neighbors and what they've been doing is very concerning. They took in traitors and gave them protection. Their president even went so far as to blame our country for spying on his administration through his own private secretary. And he expects the world to believe his lies. I can't let her speak about us like that. Let's hear her out first. I hereby invite all of you to determine the initiation of a proper intergovernmental investigation into Sordland. If the Alliance continues to shrink its given duties, you can trust in Rumberg to take matters into her own hands. It is also important to point out that Rumberg will not stand idly by if more Acadian military are transferred to eastern Merkope. I hereby condemn both the ATO and Sordland for allowing Acadians to settle in our region. Before I finish, I also want to say, Mr. Smolak, I am looking forward to reading your report. I wonder what the so-called evidence is all about. Know that your slander does not work on us. Know that we are ready to die for our freedom. Know that our kingdom stands firm and strong. Expect a grand awakening. Thank you. That was the worst speech I've ever heard. She left the rostrum without getting much applause. Then President Nine spoke my name. Mr. Anton Rayne, President of Sordland, I invite you to address the assembly. David immediately started applauding. Good luck, Mr. President. I walked up to the rostrum and took my place at the podium. In front of me were some of the most powerful leaders in the entire world. I looked them in the eyes. Thank you, Mr. President, fellow delegates. Anyone who ascends this rostrum must appreciate what a significant gathering he is addressing. I would like to stress the importance of these words, Alliance of Nations. Our century is the century of the struggle for freedom, the century of liberation from foreign occupation. Now it is more important than ever to set aside our differences and unite under this charter. Now I would like to address some of the topics mentioned here today. We are deeply saddened by the tragic events that took place in Valen. Sordland stands together with the Blutish people. I hate it when it's two choices like that. I would also like to extend my support to Mr. Van Horten. Sordland stands together with Agnolia and will keep its stance against Valslandian aggression. Sordland will do whatever it takes to make sure the aggressors will never achieve their aims. Emma Hego pounded his fist on the table again. You are nothing but a puppet of Arcasia! President Nina slammed his gavel down. I stopped myself from responding. I would also like to address the Queen of Rumberg. Sordland has always wanted to have peace between our nations, yet we're being threatened by Rumberg. It was Rumberg who shot our aircraft within our airspace. We only defended our borders. I also have some evidence to show to the Assembly. Mr. Smolak was right about the Ka-74s. We have discovered that many militant groups in Sordland were being financed or armed by Rumberg. There is another important piece of evidence that we have, provided to us by someone close to the Rumbergian government. Mr. Hailstone was branded as a traitor in Rumberg for blowing the whistle on the country's hidden nuclear facilities. I hereby call on the Alliance of Nations to serve its duty Rumberg and its nuclear facilities must be properly investigated. Thank you for listening to our concerns. I wish to see a resolution from the AN soon. We stand and always will stand for the rights of the people of Sordland and Eastern Merkope, just as those in other continents. The people of Sordland and I are honored to have expressed our concerns before this noble assembly. Peace in Merkope, peace in the world. Patricia Alvarez stood up and started applauding. Well spoken! I heard thunders of applause from half of the assembly. Thank you. I left the podium. I went back to my seat. David did not stop applauding until I sat down. Thank you, David. It was not a bad speech, Mr. President. You did well. President Rayne announced the next speaker, Dwight Walker. Mr. President, I first want to congratulate you on your election to this high office. Mr. Secretary, delegates of the Alliance of Nations, ladies and gentlemen, fellow friends. We meet again on our quest to bring peace and light into this world. But even though some of the clouds have lifted, the world has not yet escaped the darkness. The contained security practice is rapidly expanding its influence. It is very troubling to see the democratic nations of Merkope be threatened by those millennialist powers. I refer, of course, to the presence of Volslandian and Contana fleets in the Markian Sea. They are harassing other nations and hampering international trade. Is this not an attack against world peace? An attack against the free trading nations of the world? Today, our obligation to the world peace is being tested by United Contana and the millennialist bloc. If we fail to counter this threat, if we stay idle and allow them to surround us with their war machines and blockades, if the attackers do not face any consequences, then this unstable peace we believed we had built will be the world's downfall, and posterity will point its finger at us for not stopping it. Emmer Hagel and other Volslandian delegates started making noise again. This time Hagel had taken off his shoe and was banging the table with it. I have no words. The Chancellor has gone mad. It's getting ridiculous. He's not even ashamed at his age. Despite these claims, the CSP's actions will only bring about war. Yet we still believe United Contana and Acacia, together with their allies, could come to an understanding, for our mutual benefit and our desire to avoid the destruction of the world. We believe that all the people of the world must be free to choose their own future. No country, be it Arcadia or United Contana, has the right to impose its values on others. But I will say this to the leaders of United Contana. If either of us is to be secure, we need a peaceful cooperation, not defense systems, forced blockades, or shows of naval superiority. If the Alliance of Nations cannot find a resolution to this conflict, the ATO remains ready and able to react. Hagel stood up with the shoe in his hand. What is that supposed to mean? You're promoting war in the Alliance of Nations? Mr. President, this cannot. Nina slammed his gavel down and shouted, Silence, please! Mr. Chancellor, please let me finish. We did not interrupt you when you addressed the Assembly. Finally, I propose that the Alliance of Nations undertake the noble cause of helping the people of the world through rewriting and properly enforcing its Human Rights Declaration. The Alliance of Nations cannot survive as a static organization. Its size and duties are increasing enormously. It should adapt to the changing world. Where peace and rights do not rest in the hands of this organization alone. They rely on the hearts of our people and the spirit of cooperation between our nations. So let it be known, my fellow inhabitants of this world, let us take our stand and see if we can finally achieve a lasting peace. Thank you. Most of the assembly applauded his speech, the ATO delegates in particular. I stood up and applauded. The applause continued for some time. Walker shook hands with various delegates on his way back to his seat. President Rayne announced the last speaker before the break. It was Leon Maliniev. Maliniev slowly walked up to the rostrum in his iconic suit. All of the CSP delegates stood up and applauded him. Honorable Chairman and fellow delegates of the Alliance of Nations, here we are again at the most esteemed meeting of the state representatives of the world. However, increasingly, we are being threatened, disregarded, attacked, or ignored in this assembly. The representative of Acacia has just shown this unfriendly attitude towards us yet again. Acacia would have you believe we are standing in the way of lasting peace. Yet the peace they talk about was only possible thanks to our missiles and our growing base in the developing world. The ATO kept waging wars against people's revolutions and forcing new independent states to be their puppets, binding them to themselves through the Arcasian lyric. And now yet another Arcasian president is telling us that we are the aggressors, and they are the keepers of peace. We will not be silent anymore against these lies. When was this peace you talk about? Where was this cooperation between our countries? Have you ever accepted our invitation to talk about denuclearization? If you don't like us, don't accept our ideals, don't listen to our concerns, and keep pointing the fingers at us, why did you invite us to the Alliance of Nations? Every year, United Katana comes to this assembly to address the real problems of real people. People who suffer because of your systems, your wars, and your ignorance. Whether you like it or not, we'll keep representing the laborers, the slaves, the oppressed of the world. And believe it or disregard it, history is on our side. We say to the representatives of capitalist countries, come and visit us. Come and see the revolution working in Katana. Show our continent to your people without distorting the reality. If you cannot do that, then you need not come. We believe socialism will triumph over capitalism in the end, such as the logical conclusion of the development of humankind. This time, lesbian delegates started laughing very loudly. Some other delegates booed. I kept watching. You can keep laughing, gentlemen. Communism will bury you. Suddenly, the laughing turned into shouting. If you really believe in cooperation, we will be waiting. We're not going anywhere. However, if the ATO keeps intervening in our matters, it is natural that the CSP would react. Despite threats from the ATO, Rumberg, or any other nation or organization, we must not succumb to further division and violence. We must ask ourselves, what do the people of our countries expect of us? They surely don't want war and bloodshed. So let us leave to our children and grandchildren good memories of our time and better future for all. Let them look at history and say, once there were great divisions and complex problems, but the leaders of the world came together in the Alliance of Nations and succeeded in settling them in order to ensure our peaceful lives. Let us act in such a way to make the session not a session of threats, but a session of hopes and a realization of them. The government of United Katana and the United Peoples of Katana are ready to serve their duties for world peace. Long live the People's Revolution. I did not react to his speech. We are capitalist pigs. There is no honest answer there. The assembly broke into a massive applause. The applause continued for some time. Molyneux slowly walked back to his seat as the president announced the break. That was a lot. It was troubling. Tensions are too high. It's quite scary, to be honest. We need to be careful. We walked out of the hall to have some lunch and fresh air. So that was the Alliance of Nations, the UN of this world. We'll do a little bit more checking before we end the session today. With the election drawing near, our staff at the Maroon Palace has conducted general election polls all across Sordland. Our election poll shows that roughly 27% of Sordland citizens would prefer to vote for the USP in the upcoming election. That is low. But we won the election with just 30% or some 30% change. Alliance of Nations' latest session had ended with many important takeaways. However, the highlight of the gathering was without a doubt Chancellor Hegel. In a display of shameful behavior, Chancellor Hegel has repeatedly interrupted the yet known Prime Minister Van Horten and went so far as to require the intervention of the Speaker. We would like to remind that this was the meeting of the leaders of the world, not a village council. As long as this type of behavior continues, how can we ever expect a peaceful and level-headed resolution for the Helgeland issue? I think the answer to that is that we can't. The AN ambassador has extended their support after the recent revelations about Rumberg on the international stage. Sordland has received a guarantee that the international community will stand by its territorial integrity and independence in these times. That doesn't mean much, but we do appreciate the support. David wants a meeting. David had scheduled a private meeting with me, but he did not specify what it was about. Actually, I think the 27% has increased now that I think about it, because it was low the first time around. I heard a knock at the door. Mr. President, may I come in? Yes, David. Please come in. Thank you. He slowly made his way towards the chair in front of my desk and sat down. First of all, thank you for your time. Anything for you, David. I wanted to ask, how are you doing? I'm fine. Thanks for asking. That's very good. Please be sure to take some time for yourself amid all this. If you ignore the mental fatigue, it will slowly creep in on you. It will poison your thoughts. Thank you for your valuable advice. Thank you for taking my advice over the years. He started coughing. What a privilege for me. I had the chance to watch my student grow into a fine and strong leader in my lifetime. What a privilege indeed. You have brought reform to Sordland. You, my student, actually did it. You don't know how proud I was to be alongside you. It wouldn't be possible without you. You are too kind, Mr. President. David coughed again, this time for longer. I overheard a conversation the other day near a newspaper stand. It piqued my interest, so I kept listening. They were talking about you. They were calling you a die-hard Democrat. What do you think about that? They weren't wrong. I am a die-hard Democrat. My father, Arthur, used to say, always know yourself. It's good to know that you do. So, the elections are fast approaching. How are you feeling about your chances? I can't say for sure, but I am hopeful. Good. That is what a leader should say. I'm afraid I have an announcement to make to you. An announcement? What kind? After this term is done, I will be retiring. David, I can't accept this. You're irreplaceable in my cabinet. I have been in this line of work for many decades now. I swore an oath to myself years ago. I would quit if I ever felt like I didn't have the physical capability to serve anymore. At that point, I would become a hindrance. The time has come, Mr. President. My bones are aching. My hands are shaking. My voice is failing. Besides, I'm sure you can find a younger minister who is a little more full of life. He winked and chuckled. He winked at me and chuckled, which turned to another cough. You have been a mentor, a teacher, and a friend. Thank you for your service to this country. It was an honor, Mr. President. David stood up to leave. Now, bring it in, old man, bring it in! We hugged. Best of luck, Anton. Thank you. He turned around and left. Man, I'm gonna miss David. David Weesey told me he would resign from my cabinet due to old age. Literally irreplaceable. Recent polls suggest a surprising amount of support from women in Sordland. According to our pollsters, 53.4% of women said they will vote for President Rayne due to improvements in the women's rights situation. Let's go! If we have the majority of women, we will carry this nation. So, I will save my final thoughts on the cabinet situation for the final session. We'll read the newspapers right quick and call it a day. Lake and his Workers' Party of Bludia is showing great promise according to the latest polls. After Jaw's poisoning, the party has been rising in popularity, even in major cities outside of Bergia, such as Lochhaven, Gelsford, and Vogland. In a rally yesterday, Lake said the Bludish force is finally coming to the assembly. We're being supported by millions of Sordish, Bludish, and Agno-Sordish citizens. We're coming strong to break the racist structure of this country. David Weesey, Sordland's foreign minister, has announced he will be retiring at the end of President Rayne's first term. The son of Sordland's first president, Weesey has enjoyed a long and fruitful diplomatic career and served as something as a mentor to President Rayne during his student days. The Rayne administration has not yet announced a potential replacement for Mr. Weesey should Rayne be elected to a second term. Rumberg possesses nuclear weapons. During the Alliance of Nations session, President Rayne has claimed that Rumberg possessed nuclear weapons. Today, the investigation committee, tasked by AN, has found evidence that President Rayne was in fact saying the truth. Rumberg has nuclear weapons. So what does that mean for Eastern Merkope? In the region, Rumberg has always been one of the strongest military powers, and also one of the most threatening, which secures them a position of being a key player. Possession of nuclear weapons by such a country not only threatens their neighbors and longtime rivals, Sordland, but also nations that are farther away from their immediate reach. Rumberg's new status as a nuclear power will make them a force to be reckoned with. Balance of power is about to change once again. See, yeah. And this is why peace is not an option anymore. They have to be stopped. And put forward a motion in support of Sordland. During the latest session in the Alliance of Nations, voting began to put forward a motion in support of Sordland against Rumberg claims. The resolution from the Assembly was in favor of Sordland. As part of this new motion, unless Rumberg complies with the demands of the aim to stop their destabilizing activities in the region, severe sanctions may be imposed by other member countries. Queen Beatrice Livingston called the outcome preposterous and accused AN of meddling in the foreign policies of Rumberg. So we have the world behind us, we have our allies behind us. We're in a very strong position. And the women of Sordland are behind us too. Let's not forget that. In the next session, we'll have dinner at home. And we will decide on the next steps. There is no option anymore. We'll probably be ending the game with putting Rumberg in check once and for all. But they can't be allowed to continue. It's far too dangerous. Anyway, that'll be for the next session. Leave a like if you've enjoyed this series. Subscribe to the channel if you have not done so. And VNsNow.com, that is VNsNow.com, for more excellence in politicking right here. And not only right here, but definitely right here. See you in the next one.